The first priority is reliable peace, guaranteed security, respect for our people, respect for everyone who has given their life defending Ukraine from Russian aggression. Tomorrow will also be no less active. We are defending Ukraine's interests. And the strength of our position, our state position, the Ukrainian people's position, lies in the fact that it is our shared position.
Provisions. Clearly, I think we all recognize that part of getting a final end to this war will require for Ukraine to feel as it is safe and it is never going to be invaded or attacked again. So that's clearly something that has to be discussed.
International affairs commentator Doug Herbert is with me here on set. Doug, is Ukraine getting closer to getting something that it might be happy with?
Is Ukraine getting closer to avoiding having a completely unacceptable plan shoved down its throat? Maybe. We're hearing the right noises, Stuart, right? We've heard Marco Rubio basically trying to say that Ukraine will get the security guarantees. It shouldn't worry. It understands its need to feel as safe as possible from a future Russian attack. We hear all the European leaders. We've heard Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, basically saying that Europe's borders cannot be changed by force, that cannot be part of any eventual peace settlement, that it cannot be made to limit the size of its military in order to help prevent a future potential attack from Russia. These are all the things Ukraine needs to hear and wants to hear. We've even heard Ukraine's parliament speaker this morning speaking to the fact that there are red lines right now for the Ukrainians and the Europeans. And one of those red lines is obviously the non-recognition of the occupied, illegally annexed territories by Russia in the east, in the southeast of Ukraine. Obviously, the limits on its army, another red line, and the limits on Ukraine's ability as a sovereign nation to seek whatever future alliances it might want, whether that be with the EU or whether eventually that be with NATO. So the red lines are there. The Ukrainians, EU diplomats are privately briefing reporters, late last night, this morning, saying that they feel at least like their voice is being heard at the table. This is something that was not necessarily the case when we were speaking last week, when there was a sense of this plan being foisted on them by the U.S. and Russia, secretly negotiated behind their backs, as we've seen in the past, a pattern time and again. So they're at the table now. They feel that their voice is being heard. The real question behind your question, Stuart, is whether it's going to make a difference. Are they closer, perhaps, to modifying the plan? Does there seem to be a recognition it needs to be modified? Yes. Does that mean it is going to be modified and then they're going to effectively be able to enforce that in a way that Russia accepts? That's not really. That's probably almost a definite no, just based on past precedent.
You mentioned those European leaders. They are due to meet shortly as well, yes. We've heard, on the margins of the EU-African Union summit in Rwanda. They've drawn up some counter-proposals, haven't they?
First of all, the counter-proposals, Stuart, come with a caveat, right? Because the meetings over the weekend were between U.S. and Ukrainian negotiators, meeting with the national security advisors from France and Germany and Britain. And those are very tentative proposals, and they're along the lines of what we were just talking about, right? In other words, that no, Ukraine will not cede territory, that is, withdraw its forces from cities it still controls in eastern Ukraine, which is one of Russia's maximalist demands, presumably. No, it is not going to, and it does not want to be imposed on how much it has to limit the size of its army. It also wants to be able to use Russian assets to help rebuild, to be able to free up over 100 billion euros in frozen Russian assets. There's also an Russian-occupied nuclear power complex station in Zaporizhia. The Europeans, at least some of them, would like to see that handed over to joint control under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency, joint Kyiv and Moscow control. So once again, they have a lot of things they would like to see, these counter-proposals. Officially, none of those have been solidified or finalized to this point. We don't have anything clear on paper. We do know that the 28-point plan, which is now being pitched, it was just a draft by the U.S., right? It's not final. Even the Trump Thursday deadline for Ukraine to sign has apparently been pushed back. Trump himself saying it's not his final offer. There's a lot of contradictions. There's a lot of friction even within the Trump administration on what will be acceptable, what will not, what might be able to end up in that final plan. The Europeans are doing a full court press. They are meeting in Luanda this morning in order to try to further finalize their proposals.
One thing we haven't talked about yet, Doug, of course, is Vladimir Putin. I mean, is he giving any room for meaningful compromise here?
What's interesting is that Putin, we said last week that Putin said he would accept this plan as a basis for negotiations. Now, for most a lot of Russian officials, and especially the ultra-nationalists, there is absolutely no way Russia is going to accept a peace plan that has anything that would constitute what Russia sees as a threat to its own security on its border, which basically means keeping all of the things as is on the map right now, plus reducing what Russia sees as the constant threat of NATO expansion. This has been one of Russia's so-called root causes. So if Russia has its way, the 28-point plan is way too soft. It does not go nearly far enough, especially for the ultra-nationalists. Nothing would be acceptable short of complete Ukrainian capitulation. But beyond that, Ukrainian acceptance of the idea that is really hardwired into Russia's own national identity, its own Russian mythology, that Ukraine is really not its own state, never has been. Ukraine is just a part of Russia. And until Ukraine accept that and protect Russian people and the Russian language and the role of the Russian Orthodox Church within Ukraine, no peace plan is going to be acceptable. So the question put to me is, you asked me, what about the European counterproposals? That's all fair and well. Yeah, they might end up in a modified plan. There is no way, no how, that it will be acceptable to Russia, especially the ultranationalist factions in Russia, as it is, even in a slightly modified version. I'll just end with this thought that Keith Kellogg, who's a special Ukraine envoy for Donald Trump, actually has said that the U.S. understands that it cannot accept another Budapest Memorandum, 1994, another Minsk Agreement, 2015, which were these Russia-preferable, Russia-tilted agreements, which ended up as, watch the map, look at the history that happened afterwards. And yes, nothing at this point seems to be able to prevent Russia from pursuing its Maximus goals. There's neither the European will, despite all the nice words, and there's not even the way, without the U.S. firmly on board, which doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. And even then, there's a big question mark over whether anything could stem or stymie Vladimir Putin's determination to accept anything short of capitulation.
Doug, thanks very much. Doug Herbert, international affairs commentator for us there on France 24.